And the first question I had is, why was Scream so successful? You know, there are so many slashers that came before it. What made Scream kind of like separate itself from the pack? So we'll start with you, Gums. Let's hear what you have to say.
Hey, I'd love to start this off. I just want to thank you guys for letting me be here for the like fifth consecutive time. Anyways, with that said, I think what made this thing so successful is, well, one, Wes Craven, because the dude's just a beast. And anybody that's like a real movie buff, I'm not a movie buff, man. I just love movies, right? But like a movie buff would probably witness Wes Craven and the way he pans and the way he changes angles and like all this stuff that you fit together to make a movie and just be like, that's why he's legendary. Because even I noticed like when they're skimming around the houses or let's, Scream, when they're skimming around the houses and like painting on her porch and all this shit and all these angles, you're kind of like, if you really look at that, that's some great cinematography. Like, I know it's not something you think about, but like he adds suspense by the angles he takes, right? So he's working with the actors. So I think that was like a really big one, is that just him and who he is and how he caught their reactions and actions and how he put that together was great. And then secondly, it was like a murder mystery plot too. So while it fit all the stereotypes needed to be a slasher, and while it fit all these stereotypes to be a horror, what really kind of brought you in there was this like mysterious killer on the loose. Who is he? Who is he? We got to find out who it is. And nothing draws you in more than a good mystery. So I think a lot of people were very, very involved. So it paid homage to the 80s and 70s of these like slasher flicks that were kind of like corny and weird. And then it just like brought it to the new age with like this murder mystery plot on top of that. And like people being self-aware of like scary movies even in that movie Scream. So it was cool.
I like that. What about you, Kirby Lauren?
Well, for me, it's just the satire. Like the whole movie it's satire, but in such a beautiful way. It makes fun of and points out the like, as they call it, the formula for horror movies, while sticking to that same formula. So as Gum said, it's very self-aware. Like, one of the perfect examples is when Sydney gets the call initially. They're talking, asking like why she doesn't really like horror movies, and she says, oh, it's full of just big breasted bimbos that are not intelligent. They're running upstairs when they should be running to the front door. And what happens? She gets attacked. She runs upstairs instead of running to the front door. And it just shows like it breaks down what horror movies are like so well. Like the killers, you have two killers. Normally slashers it's one, but with the two it can really play with the strange timing of things that you'd see in other horror movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th. Michael Myers is everywhere. Like, you just can't get away from that guy. He's walking at a slightly brisk pace. Everybody else is running, yet he's still right there. So with two killers, you're acknowledging the fact that the killer can be anywhere, while grounding the whole timing issues. Like, you'll see Billy pop up in one spot after the killers emerged, and then Stu doesn't come into the screen until like later on, showing that he was off somewhere else doing something. So they just tackle the horror genre, the slasher genre in general, just very well, and they bring a lot of things to light, and then they just play with the whole concept very well.
Yeah. Spoiler alert from 1996.
Yeah.
There's two killers.
There's two
Killers at the end of the movie,
But-
and that's like a plot twist.
Like, and my favorite thing about it is like the opening scene. I mean, it's such an iconic scene now, but you see like in the beginning of it, the conversation between the caller and God, what was it's Drew Barrymore. I don't remember the character's name, but it starts off very playful for the first like, what is it, minute and a half, 2 minutes, and then it switches with that one line. It's like, I want to know who I'm looking at. And from there, it's like another minute of it just gradually getting like it, just the action starts to accelerate more and more. The anxiety accelerates more and more for another minute or so. And then something else happens where he says, I want to see what your insides look like. And then it accelerates even more. So it really does this great thing with, the pacing, the timing of horror movies. So I think that's why it was so successful, is it just kind of revitalized what a slasher movie can be.
I do gotta say, kind of like on that subject too, about like just like the two killer concept and whatnot, and just the way that they frame it out, like is so different than I think a lot of other horror movies. And that, like, you know, horror is like so it's around like that character, right? Around the Freddy Krueger and the Jason Voorhees, and like that, like that's the character you follow through as like, and you don't really connect too much to them. Like this was a very different take in that way, that is like, you knew who the characters were before the reveal, right? Like you knew that you saw dialogue from them, you saw interactions from them, and it wasn't like, you know, it was this like other character that like you like set in the shadows or something like that. It was like you knew who these characters were. It was just another mass murderer that you kind of went through. I think that really helped this movie in itself, not almost like not corner itself. In the way that it is like, oh, you're not stuck into like one plot point.
Exactly. That set it apart, because, you know, in like Halloween and Friday the 13th, like there are these just voids of people that like, you know, Jason, Michael Myers, they're just completely void of like just humanity pretty much. They are just there to kill. That's it. Whereas in Scream, you have these two fleshed out characters that just end up being the killers. And it's kind of cool. Like, I don't know, you know, if this is on purpose or not, but if you watch the them develop as characters throughout the movie, like Billy takes on like the very calculated and calm, like killer aspect of things. He's got that personality type, where Stu is much more instinctive and just I don't know if instinctive is the right word, but he moves off of instinct. He doesn't really seem to be calculated. He's kind of an idiot. And he just reacts to things. And then towards the end of the movie, when Stu is killed, Billy takes on the entire persona, where he just kind of loses his shit. So I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but it was kind of cool how they played with like the duality between two characters, what you would normally see in like a serial killer.
Yeah. They 100% that was on purpose. 100% Wes Craven did that on purpose. I have no doubt in my mind that was set up that way. And when you rewatch that film, like after you find out who the killers are and you start paying attention to those guys, that's when you pick up on stuff like that and you go, holy shit, this movie is crazy.
Before I give my answer, I gotta get Lauren's too.
Yeah.
The Ghost of Lauren.
The Ghost of Lauren. I know, because you can't see me. Well, there's a couple different things, you know, the fact that they bring Drew Barrymore, you know, everyone's like, oh, Firestarter, a huge movie star, and she dies immediately. So it kind of like sets that up where it's like you can't really trust that everyone's going to survive, because you don't know who will survive, because, you know, you have this big name on there and they kill her right off the bat. But as far as, you know, why I feel like this one was successful, a lot of the other horror movies, for example, Halloween, Friday the 13th, you know who the killer is right off the bat. So this whole entire time you're thinking, who is this one killer? Who is this one killer? And then, you know, they kind of throw you the whole two killer aspect of it. And it kind of just throws you in a loop, because the whole entire movie, you're guessing, is it this person? And then someone dies and the person you thought it was is in frame. So you're like, oh, well, it can't be this one person. And I really feel like no one thought more than one killer. So it kind of threw people like, oh, well, I thought it was this person and I thought it was that person. So it just makes the reveal so much more. And just the fact that the whole entire time they're making fun of horror movies, and then what they make fun of, you know, the girl dying in the garage door opener. Like, it's so ridiculous. And it's like, the big breasted girl did die and she tried to get out through a doggy door. Like, how dumb can you be? Like, but I just think that they did some stuff that we weren't used to. And that's why it was so successful, because it was the first time seeing something like that an average person could be a murderer. And they did have a motive, but it wasn't, you know, like Halloween, childhood trauma, you know, something drove them to this madness. It was like, no, Billy, the guy I went to school with, is the murderer.
Just a crazy
and
guy.
Just to kind of add to it, so what Gums was saying about once you watch it again, you kind of pick up on some stuff. So I truly believe that the scene in the garage where the killer gets tripped, and every time he trips or stumbles, I think it's Stu. Like, I just think his mannerism, like, I'm like, oh, that's Matthew Lillard.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Look how clumsy he is.
Mm-hmm.
The
Which is-
clumsy one
Yeah,
is
so
this too. Yeah.
must have been him.
Matthew Lillard, guy's a legend.
He,
Go
I
ahead,
love
Gums,
him
and then
so
I'll
much.
Give my response
Yeah.
here.
Well, my favorite scene ever is when he gets hit in the phone.
Oh, hit
Like
with the
that.
phone, yeah.
His whole death scene is just like so awesome. Like, oh, you hit me with the phone, dick.
Yeah. That was unscripted too, I think.
Yeah.
And the whole like, my mom and dad are gonna be so proud of me.
Do you have something to say, Gums, before I go?
Yeah. I think I actually think the premise of the movie while he was murdering them was that like Sidney Prescott's mom was sleeping with Billy's dad, and they were also dating. So he was like really mad that his father and her mom were seeing each other, and then so he ended up murdering her mom. I think that's what this. Correct me if I'm wrong out there, but it's like, and then he just starts killing his friends. Like,
Well, that's so that was Billy's motive. After I think Pat, Seth, you
Sure.
both have to answer the first question, but I do have a theory that I found online that I want to share once the segment's done. But yeah,
Yeah,
that
I'll
was
hear it.
his whole
Okay.
motivation.
Yeah.
okay, that's an odd motive, but all right.
So, for me, I think like Wes Craven is a genius, kind of like what Gum said. Like he did Nightmare on Elm Street, which is also kind of like a play on horror as well. It's like a goofy serial killer, and like the premise is goofy. But for like the Scream movies, they are very self-aware of what they are, and it pokes at the previous slashers and like horror franchises. But it also like reinvents the wheel and creates like a scary movie on its own. But I just love the way that it pays tribute to like all of the like movies that came before it. So like you have Freddy Krueger is in the hallway when the principal gets killed. You have the guy dressed up in the sweater and the hat. It's actually Wes Craven is in costume.
Yeah.
If you didn't know that,
Mhm.
he's the janitor. And then also you have them like all watching Halloween in the house. So you have all of that, and then they also have like all these different like quotes that they use from like Psycho, Carrie, and like all these other Easter eggs. I mean, there's so many that like we don't have enough time for that, but there's just so many like Easter eggs and things, and it's just different in the way that it knew it was a horror movie, and everybody in it knew it was a horror movie, but they all still made the same mistakes that everybody usually makes in a horror movie,
Yep.
which is really ridiculous. But did you wanted to go too, Pat? Right? I think. you didn't finish
Yeah,
yours.
so like it just kind of just finishing off kind of my statement, and this kind of just a prequel to like the rest of this episode and whatnot. Like I am by in no means in any way shape or form typically a fan of the horror genre, right? So that's kind of going to be a little bit of like the take that I'm here. This was my first time watching Scream, and I saw it last night for the first time. And it was kind of like to Kirby and to all your guys' points for that matter, just a very different take on it. And I think part of the reason I still could appreciate this movie was because of kind of what you said, Seth, about it really just being that much more self-aware and like it's so actively not taking itself seriously, right? And it just being able to kind of be a little more loose with it while still kind of having like those like little tidbits and shots to the genre itself did make it just made it more enjoyable to watch over like I think what was typically seen in horror in that era. So yeah, I think that just definitely is something that like from somebody who's typically a little more outside this genre, something I did appreciate coming from this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think something that you should be aware of too, you might actually be the best person on this podcast to have these conversations with. Because you're going to be like 90% of the people in the world. Like maybe we talk about it. I guess Seth has some good stats for us later, but like there's a lot of people that just don't dig horror at all or that genre. So the fact that you sat down and watched it and are able to talk about it is great, one. But two, you'll be able to come from a perspective of somebody who doesn't really give a shit about the genre. So you can kind of, play with it that way too.
Which is why we need you on here, Pat. You're part of the squad.
I was a little
think it'll be
concerned.
great.
Yeah, I was a little concerned coming into this pod, like just like I texted Seth ahead of time. I was like, "Yo, like, am I the dude to have on this episode? Like, I don't watch horror. Like, it's just not."
100%.
I told him, I was
never
like,
been
yes, bro, have faith. I know it's good.
Yeah,
I got this.
It's never been my genre, but like being able to rift, we'll be able to get. I'll be that third party echo that is like, hey, from the non horror point of view, here's why you should still watch Scream. Like,
Hell yeah. Love it.
What was your take that you wanted to give us, Kirby?
All right. So I had read this probably a couple of weeks ago, and then Lauren and I watched Scream again last night. And so the theory is that Billy's got his motive is his mom left because his dad was having the affair, and it was Sydney's mom, and that just kind of pushed him off the deep end because his mom left. But Stu really didn't have a motive. So the theory that was kind of bouncing around is that Stu is actually gay, and he's in love with Billy. And
That's interesting.
it was
That
kind
makes
of
sense.
it was kind of interesting. So he was kind of
Yeah.
just going along with it due to his feelings. But if you think about the movie, like all of the looks that Stu gives to Billy throughout the entire movie, it kind of I don't know, it kind of fit from
Well,
what I was watching.
And also to like Lauren's point that like she thinks that it was Stu who killed his girlfriend. I mean, in the garage, that's his girlfriend. So
Yep.
like, why would he be the one to kill his girlfriend?
Well, that scene kind of like pissed me off a little bit because she's throwing beer at him. He's covered in beer. And then both of them are dry after. I was like, you'd be reeking of alcohol. But
Hey, it was the 90s.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Fast Nine
94.
Tours.
Global warming, things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just an interesting take that I saw online. So we were watching it last night. I'm like, just looking at the way Stu's looking at Billy, like, okay, I can kind of see
That's
that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Like a love triangle. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
I also saw like another take like that, but it was Billy. His last name's Loomis, and the reason they did that is to honor Dr. Loomis
Yep.
from Halloween.
Yep.
So I never put that together, but I saw that the other day, and I was like, oh, they actually named Billy Loomis after Dr. Loomis from Halloween. So there's another little Easter egg.
So in other words, he might have also had the approach of just like, I like to see chaos form,
Yeah.
just like the doc did.
Yeah.
I mean,
Weird.
kind of like what you guys all said. Like, Wes Craven had a purpose for all of this.
Dude, he
Yeah.
did, because he was
Yeah.
combining his worlds, dude. He
Yeah.
was going to make the first multiverse.
Oh
oh
yeah.
god.
I'm just saying.
Dude,
Like,
that's
that
the
was it. He
epitome
was
of,
on his
like,
way.
Yeah, that's the epitome of like a super nerd gets a big budget to make a movie and just throws every homage that they possibly can into a film.
Freaking Jamie Kennedy was in this movie
Oh,
too.
dude.
Yeah, a lot of
that
stars.
scene where he's in the
movie star.
party and he's watching Halloween, and the the
Mhm.
killer's behind him. He's like, and he's talking to the TV like, Jamie, turn around, Jamie, turn
Jamie
around,
Kennedy's
he's
right.
right
Yeah.
there. And his real name it was meta as hell. It was pretty
So
great.
meta. He's like, don't say goodbye. Every time you say you're leaving, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Right back.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.